Welcome to Project Looking Glass. So in this series, I'm going to be going over our devlog for an upcoming project that I'm trying to work on, which is going to be a dark fantasy or grimdark style action-adventure game with a linear progression system. So the player will go from area to area and they'll gain power-ups, they'll gain weapons, gear, all that kind of stuff in a typical RPG setup. I wanted to create this devlog to bring all of you along with me on this journey to creating a fantastic, Souls-like dark fantasy game. The first thing that we're going to need to do, as we would do for any RPG style game, we need to come up with player statistics. We're going to go ahead and implement those into a player character, and we're also going to be creating a heads-up display for the player to show off the stats that they have available at the time. We're going to start off with 3 stats, that being the 3 typical ones that you would find in any RPG, that being health, stamina, and mana, or some other kind of magic bar that you would use. And we're going to be showcasing the HUD with those statistics. Now we may add some more statistics later on, but the player stats that we have set up for this are just going to be the basic building blocks. So without further ado, let's get into it. Alright, so we have here our beginning third-person template level. I started a new project, and we're going to be using this map in order to show off the character, the abilities, and anything that doesn't need an actual level for us to show the effects that we have for our character. We're just going to be using this. And to start off with, we're going to be adding player stats to the character. So if we come down here to our third-person character folder, or your first-person character, I suppose, whatever character you want for your game, you're going to want to go to that character model. So we're going to go to Blueprints. You're going to want to go to your third-person character here if you're using it. Load it, and you'll be presented with all kinds of input, mappings, camera input, all the works. This is what creates your basic character right off the bat, which I can show here. Right now we're using the female Quinn model, I believe, so we're going to stick with this and just use the basic Unreal Engine mannequin, and we'll be able to show off what we're looking at with just this. You can see I've got movement, I've got a jump mechanic, no sprint, basic camera movement, basic traversal, but we're going to make this much better. So the first thing that we're going to want to do, going into our blueprint, we're going to want to create a variable. So we're going to want to create a variable down here in our list. We're going to call this, let's start with health. But we're going to actually have 6 variables that we create because we're going to be using fractions and percentages for our heads-up display. So the first variable we're going to create is called current health. And you're going to want to make this a float variable because we're going to be dealing with percentages. Next, we're going to want to come over here to category. And you're going to want to make a category for player stat. This is just to keep everything organized because you can see it put it into a list. We'll be able to find this easily. Now we can duplicate current health, and we're going to call this one max health. And you can see this is in the player stat as well. So now we have our max and current health. We'll be using these to create progress bars, percentages, and keep track of the player's health, stamina, and magic. So now that we have these two, we can actually duplicate these. And we're going to want 6 of these. So we're just going to go with current stamina and current mana. We'll just call it mana to start with. There we go. Rename these. I'll call that stam. current mana, and max mana. And there we go. We have that all set up. But as you can see, each of our variables is all set to 0. We will fix this in a minute, but first we're going to want to create our heads up display. So if we come to our content folder, we're going to want to create a folder for all of our project assets that we're creating. I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm going to call this game. Inside game, I'm going to create another folder, and we're going to call this widgets. Open up widgets, right click in an empty space, and you're going to want to come down to user interface right here. Come down to widget blueprint, and you'll want to click on user widget. We're going to name this a conventional naming system, so we're going to do WPB widget, or WBP, sorry, which is widget blueprint, underscore, and we're going to call this heads up display. Now we have a heads up display. Double click it to open. You'll be presented with this canvas. That's the first thing that we're going to want to add, because this is going to be what our players see. So the first thing we're going to want to add is going to be a canvas. Come up to the bar, if I can spell, there we go. Drop a canvas panel on here, and this is going to be the player's screen. Anything inside of this is going to show on the player's screen. Now that we have that, we're going to want to do a vertical box. Take the vertical box and drop it straight onto the canvas. And this is going to be your anchor. We're going to want to come over to the anchor here, make sure vertical box is selected. And we're going to want to set this, let's set it middle left. Come over to position, 0 these out, and it will put it right on the dot. Then we're going to want to drop this down. So we're going to want to take position Y. Reversing it brings it up. So we'll increase it and put it right down here. Let's put it at about 250. And we're going to want it a little bit away from the player's screen. So let's increase position X by 50. That should be good. We're going to want to size to content too. This will make it so that the box is only as large as whatever's inside of it. So now we're going to add some stuff to the vertical box. We're going to add a couple of horizontal boxes now. We're going to add one, dragging it directly onto vertical box so that it's paired with this object. You can now move this however you want. We're going to name this box as health stats. We'll duplicate this, Control D, and we'll name this one stamina stats. Duplicate it again, and do the same for mana. Now that we have that, we're going to add a text box to each. There we go. And we're going to do, we'll just call this health, I believe. There we go. We can duplicate, drag this onto stamina. There we go. Do the same with mana. Don't know what I was doing there. There we go. So health, stamina, mana. You can see we now have text box here. But these are a little bit close to each other, so we're going to select the text. Actually, I think we can select the horizontal boxes, and we're going to want to come up to padding. So this is the amount of space in between each of the objects. This puts a little bit of a barrier on whichever direction you're putting the number on. So we're going to select top. We're going to do 20. This puts a little bit of a gap in between each of these things. You can see there's a gap at the top too. We don't need that, but I'm going to leave it anyway, just in case you want to add something to it. And that should be good. That should be all we need for now. So over on text, we're going to want to select each of these text boxes, and we're going to want to create a binding for it. Create a binding, and you'll get a function. Now what we need to do is create a reference to the player character. So there's a couple of ways that you can do this. This is the way that I like to do this. We're going to create a new function. We're going to make the function named getPlayerReference. And now off of getPlayerReference, the execute node, we're going to cast to third person or whatever character model you're using, and we're going to get the character. Off of object, we're going to get player pawn, and we're going to create a variable by right-clicking and promoting to variable. Make sure it's this one and not local, because local variable can only be used inside of this function. So this can't be referenced ever. Promote to variable, and you'll want to rename this as player reference. Compile, save. We'll go to the event graph, and we want to call this function on construction. So when the widget is created, we'll have this reference. There we go. That's the wrong thing to do. Sorry. Get player reference, the function, not the variable, the function. That threw me off how high that was. So now this is set. Back in our get health text, we can now call this reference, and we can get the health variable. So we'll type in health. We can now get current health, and we can get max health. So in order to return how much health we have, what we're going to want to do is get an absolute value for these, or we'll actually want to round this up. So we're going to do round. And this turns a float value into an integer. And I believe this rounds up. Yes, it rounds up. Or down? No, it rounds. Rounds to the nearest integer. So either up or down, it will round to the whole number. We're going to duplicate that. Plug in our max health. And now that we have these, we're going to come off of the return node, and we're going to do an append. That did not work. And I know why that didn't work. That's because this is a text. Append is for string. So there's probably a different way to do this, but this works perfectly fine. If you do append, scroll down, off of string, you'll have this function here. So this is a very interesting node. What this does is it converts variables into strings, and you can then convert this into a text node. So we're going to plug this into text to string. There we go. So here's how we're going to do this. We're going to take the current health, plug it into A. And now we're going to want to add a pin. This will add another pin here. We'll plug in max health into C. And in the middle, we're going to do space. We'll do a backslash and space. Compile, save. Back into that. There we go. Back into designer. And essentially what that's going to wind up looking like is, if I can find text. Oh, I can't. So essentially what it's going to wind up looking like is, let's say you have 50 hit points, but you have a maximum of 150 hit points. It'll look something like this. So this is what the text is going to look like once we create the widget. So we'll recreate that binding on each of our stamina and mana, switching out the variables for each one. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and we'll time skip to the next part. All right, so now we have all of our bindings set up, and this is going to be a basic building block for our HUD system. And you can see this is still set up to read as text. I don't think I can change those, but that's fine. These are going to change as we create it. So now we need to implement this HUD system. So there's a couple of different ways we can do this. For the first part of this, let's go ahead and make it so that when the player enters the game, it'll create the HUD. We'll change this later so that it's a little bit more protected, but for now we can just put it on the player character. So off of event begin play, we're going to create all of our widgets. This will be in wherever we decide to put the widgets later, but we're going to come off of the last execution node, and we're going to do a create, if I can spell, widget. And you'll come up with this node here, and you need to select a class. You'll want to type in whatever widget you created. We did WBP, if I can spell. I did WBP, there we go. Heads up display. Compile. And off of return, we're going to add to viewport. So this adds it to the player's screen at the creation. And that should be all we need. So if we go into third person, hit play, there we are. We have our heads up display just down here. But this still says 0, so let's go in and change how much our basic stats are set up. So in our third person character, we're going to come over to our maximum health, and we're going to just come up with some random numbers real quick. I'd say standard health would be 50. We can have a maximum stamina of 100. And run around quite a bit. And mana in most games that I've played has always been the lowest stat that you have unless you are playing a specifically mage character. So let's do 20. So now if we play this, we have our basic setup right here. But this still says 0 because we didn't set our current stats, but we don't want it to always read what the maximum is. So what we're going to do is this. In our third person character, coming off of event begin play, and before we create the widget, we're going to do a sequence. So a sequence node runs a bunch of different things and all at the same time. So we're going to create a widget at the same time that we're doing that. Or actually, we don't want to do that at the same time because that might break it. So we're going to go ahead and do this instead. We'll run it off of one of the execution nodes. We're going to take current health. Wrong. We are going to take current health and set it. Then we're going to take current stamina and set it. Move you down here. And current mana and set it. Then we can connect this to one of our set nodes. And what we're going to do, we are going to take our maximums and just plug them in. There we go. Compile, save. Now when we start, we have maxed out stats. Well, we don't have anything to do with them quite yet, so in the next episode, I'm going to go ahead and create a sprinting system, and we'll also add a basic attack system to drain stamina. Alright, so in this episode we decided to start our game dev series by creating a set of player statistics to show on a heads-up display. We went ahead and created a series of variables in our player character, and then made a reference to that player character in a user widget. We then created bindings for our widget that would pull the variables for each of those player stats and show them on screen. In our next episode, we're going to be doing a little bit more with our player stats, so I'm going to be adding a player attack function and a sprinting function, both of which will drain the stamina. We will also be adding a stamina regen system and adding functionality so that when we run out of stamina, we won't be able to attack or run for a couple of seconds, and if we are running, we'll start walking again. This is the first episode in our series, and we have many more things to cover before we have a viable game. So if you found this video helpful for your own projects, or you find yourself interested in what we are going to be creating here, please hit the like button and subscribe to stay up to date on our series. If you're interested in game mechanics, check out some of my other videos for a game jam that we recently did, where I go over topics such as using timelines and dynamic materials to create a crop system for a farming game. The next video for this series will be coming out soon, so I hope to see you all there. Until next time, go out, make an impact.